Hey everyone, welcome to Recruiting Connections with Chris Murdock. But Damien, please introduce yourself and we'll just jump right into the conversation.
Thanks for having me. I have a software staffing company called Scalable Path, and we specialize in placing, software developers, web application developers, mobile developers, and I guess we're both in the recruiting space and looking forward to diving into it with you.
Well, absolutely. And I think that, one of the interesting things about, one of the reasons why we call this Recruiting Connections is, we're actually all in this together. We all have a similar goal. When we get into recruiting, we're either people pleasers, problem solvers, or troubleshooters, or all of the above. Like, that's why we get into this. We love connecting with people in some way. Some people are better at the connection, some people aren't. But then talking to people that have the technical mindset in recruiting, it's often interesting to hear that, the debate of, how much do you automate in the recruiting process versus, that personal connection, that personal interaction. And that was something that you and I talked about kind of in our pre-call when I kind of brought up the connections. What's your, let's get your hot take really quick on that automation, and then see where this goes.
Yeah, well, I'm a programmer by training, and pretty much most of my internal team come from a development background. So I don't think we're, typical, in the recruiting space in that sense. And we actually are big fans of automation. Like, I want to automate as much as I possibly can. But I think that the most important thing you can do, and in probably any business, and if you want to really, for me, feel really good about what I'm doing, I want to deliver the best possible experience to my clients, and I want to deliver the best and my clients are companies and my clients are candidates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if doing that automation is going to significantly detract from that experience, that's where I start to question it, right?
Yeah, I had when I first got, started IQ Talent, we had a client who wanted to remove the gut, the gut part, the feeling
Mm-hmm.
part of recruiting. And for 6 months, we argued about it. And they were looking at software. And this was 13 years ago. I mean, they were looking for technology that would remove the gut check that we have in recruiting,
Mm-hmm.
or the I feel
Yeah,
language,
yeah.
or the I think language. But ultimately, we found ways to automate certain parts, like the scheduling and some of the information capture. But ultimately, because they were so ingrained, this certain philosophy was so ingrained, you couldn't discern that without having a conversation. And so we ultimately, after 6 months, landed on what this balance for them, which is going to be different for everybody. But the balance we landed on was information capture, process capture, but to actually discern who these people were in relation to their company culture, you had to have in-depth conversations. And what we did was we just helped them determine better questions to ask. So we were actually shortening the time to have the conversation so that they could have better conversations by automating this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When do you ever get pushback from the clients when you're trying to automate, or from the candidates when where do you figure out the pain points
Well,
in the automation process?
first, one thing you said, I think I
Oh,
want to revise my initial answer, because you said, I said it's, well, if I'm not detracting from the experience, but I think, there a very core issue too is like, what results can you deliver,
okay.
right? Right. And so, yeah, you care about the experience of those people. You got to deliver good candidates. You got to fill positions with good people. And so I also believe, and that's getting at what you said, that at some points in the process that a machine can't do as good of a job as a human for key points in the process. And so I believe that as well. So I wanted to revise that.
Well, I think and actually what's interesting is we were having discussions about, we're my firm, IQ Talent, we're our parent company Caldwell, they are firm believers in the predictive index, the PI. And so everyone's gone through it. And I came at it, and this is, I'm sure if you took this, you'd be on the more objective side of things, where engineers tend to live. I'm on the more feeling side. So I tend to be on the subjective side versus objective. And I think looking at the people side, the experiential side is where I'm going to live. And you're going to look, and maybe you're going to be more of the details oriented side, where you're going to be you're going to wait to see what the candidate's threshold is going to be, what the client's threshold,
Well,
because everyone's going to be different.
Can you elaborate on what you mean when you say predictive index?
So the predictive index is like the Myers-Briggs. It's like a Myers-Briggs assessment, and so my first questions are always going to be the feeling side of things, and then some of my colleagues are more data oriented, detail oriented, and so I'm going to anticipate issues. I'm going to anticipate these things because I'm going to be like super empathetic. But the thing is, then there are other people like my client, they were willing to see what happened and then react to what's happening, versus me being more proactive about trying to anticipate things. And then they were kind of waiting to see what the pain points were in the automation process, and they were able to adapt to what the candidates, and ultimately there was a balance. I wanted to keep the gut there, they wanted to figure out how to get rid of it, and ultimately the compromise was a mixture of the two.
So your process changes with each client,
Very much so. Very much so.
And so I think with us, we sort of handle the initial part of the process for all of our clients. And so that part of it doesn't change. When we start passing over candidates to clients, we do kind of follow, their process at that point. But, you asked me, where we fall on automating things. And I would say within our niche, which is sort of the premium on-demand tech talent space, I think the other companies tend to automate more than us. Some of our competitors, I think and my theory is that they're the big names, at least that we hear about, the Top Tals and the Turings, they're backed by VC money. They need these higher returns, and they need to, in order to achieve that, they might feel that pressure to automate more. That's the only way that you could potentially be a unicorn from a money perspective, right? And so maybe if you're going to try to shoot the moon, you have to sort of either sell this AI story or sell these like multiples of like scalability and everything, right? So you have to try to go for that. But I think what happens is when you try to become so big and process so many people without spending tons of money, the people that go through your process kind of start to feel like cattle, right? And that's why I think, you have to take a step back and say like, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, do I want to deliver that experience to the developers or the candidates? Does it actually even result in better outcomes? I don't think so. So I think we will automate everything where we can, but when we start saying, no, this is going to have a worse outcome, or it's going to have a crappy experience for somebody, we're going to say, no, we got to leave the human interview there, and like, for example, affecting outcomes. I mean, we've all done it ourselves. You bend the truth on your resume. It's kind of like how you get to the next level sometimes in your career, right? And you can kind of stretch yourself, and you can cut people some slack there, but people will put things into resumes and when answering questions that aren't necessarily true. And I think that it's a lot easier to fool a machine than it is to fool a human. And that is a key part, I think, that affects outcomes.
It's the bullshit detector. Like,
Yeah.
we have
Yeah.
AI isn't able to detect BS yet.
Yeah.
I have there are some there are some recruiters I know that can have a 2-minute conversation with somebody and know if they're full of crap. Like, and it's just 25, 30 years of experience, and you can't train that into an AI algorithm. Maybe
maybe
down the road you
someday.
can't. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say maybe someday. And I think also, you were just talking about, one word that came to mind is, what's the motivation for your company? Like, what motivates your employees, what motivates your candidates, what's motivating your management team? What's your mission statement? Is your mission statement to increase your profit margins and automate as much as possible and
Right.
become a volume play, because they're only going to be, not everyone's going to want to like work in that kind of an experience, go through that kind of experience? Or are you going to focus on outcomes and improving outcomes for as many people, which typically means fewer people getting through the process, but you have a higher probability of a hit, or a placement in this case. So what's your, how do you, and every client's different, but what's your overall like mission statement for
Yeah. To
Scalable Path?
provide the best possible hiring experience for both the client and the developer. And you know, even outside of that mission statement, I think, talking to people that work on our talent team, what like motivates a lot of them is like feeling like they're connecting with people and helping them. They like, you know, the stories where like, hey, like you hear, oh, getting placed with this client through Scalable Path like really changed my life for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good feeling that keeps people liking their jobs. And I think when you get to know people and then see them succeed, and sometimes they come back and you get to work with them again, and those connections are much more motivating than just like sifting through a list of people that you never talk to.
And I think, and yeah, because I mean, if you're just a resume being passed around by a bunch of recruiters, I mean, there's no connection there
Yeah.
between the candidate and your recruiter. And so what's going to guarantee that there's going to be a connection between the developer and the client? And I think nowadays, with people working remotely, with people, not going into offices, starting that connection and starting to develop that connection is incredibly important as early as possible. So I like your approach. How do you maintain those connections through the process, like through the life cycle of an engagement and even
Yeah.
beyond?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, we're talking a lot about the candidate side, and we can go into that, but there's also the client side. I
Mm-hmm.
think that the key point for us with the client side is understanding their needs. And that's really typically in the context of a job description, because especially in tech, like it's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have a goal and you think you know what you want, and some clients do, but sometimes you don't completely. And we will talk to them, and not only do we get to know them, but there's like some consulting going on there, right? So it's like, actually what you probably need to put in this job description is this and this because your company needs this. So that's really that most important touch point on the client side that I don't think, if you're just like a two-sided marketplace and if you're Upwork and the clients just like, they don't really know what they need. They know they're doing something with a website, but they don't even know how to define what they need. They're not going to have a great outcome.
Yeah.
They're not going to have a
Sometimes,
great outcome for a lot of reasons, probably on Upwork, but like that's one big reason. So
yeah. And the thing is, a lot of times, with our clients, we collaboration and calibration are two very important aspects of what we do. So if we don't collaborate with our clients as if we're part of their team, we're not going to be able to understand their actual needs. And so we turn around calibration profiles within 24 hours so that they can see what we understood. It's an opportunity for us to share with them. Here's what you told us. Here's how we applied it to our search filters. These are candidates that we think are a good fit. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is sometimes the hiring managers go, oh, this isn't what I need at all. And then we'll ask the question, were we off? They're like, no, you returned what we asked for.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we need. And that does happen. It doesn't happen a lot. But when it does happen, it's like an aha moment for the client. You wouldn't have gotten that had we just sent over a bunch of resumes, hope that something stuck. We really
Mm-hmm.
want to know what the client's needs are, the wants are, and then actually sometimes they're two different things. And if
Mm-hmm.
that happens, we can identify that quickly. You can't automate that kind of discovery.
Totally.
At least, yeah. I always say yet. You never know, these living algorithms over at Google, these AI that are now becoming sentient, for the news articles. Eventually they'll figure it out. They'll mature enough to be empathetic and understand all these things, and we can automate. But it's not right now.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, so that's the client side. I think there's more for us, at least on the candidate side. We've got an initial interview. I mean, we tend to automate early in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's sourcing,
Mm-hmm.
answering, applying, answering a bunch of questions. It's early on, right? But then when you're getting in those later phases, like where you think they're a good fit, but you're not sure, and you thinking whether they're going to get presented to a client, that's where we say, okay, let's have a conversation about, let's get to know your communication skills. Let's talk about your experience. For us, there's some other things, we're not only full-time. It's like, what are you working on right now? Do you have time to take on this thing? And that's another where an AI would kind of fail. But then, then the big one for us is the live coding exercise. So like, we're obviously very tech focused, and we'll do like a real world programming exercise. And they're doing that, sharing their screen with one of our, interviewers, watching them. And if they're getting stuck on something totally stupid where they might have just given up without someone there, you might say, look, I can tell this guy is actually good. Let me just say, like, look, what if you mistyped that one little thing and it's been throwing you off because you're nervous? Just fix that up, and I know you can get through this. And that's a little bit of that human approach where we use a little judgment. It's like, I could tell this person was really good, even though they only got 75% through the coding exercise. I'm going to recommend them to the client. This is not a cold, hard process.
And the thing is, when you make it a cold, hard process, when you have it an automatic coding test, that's not how they're going to code. Like they're collaboratively coding with other people that are going to catch this and going to catch that. And if they know something's not right, but they don't know where they went wrong, they're more often than not, they're asking somebody for that help.
Yeah.
And you can't get that from an automated coding test. And so we've seen in some coding tests where the client will take somebody that gets a 50%. Then why have it? Like, why are we doing the coding test if you're just going to keep lowering the bar?
Well, there's two things in there. There's the type of thing you're asking them to do, and then there's the more collaborative environment. So like a lot of coding tests, people are catching on, but it's something we've been doing for a while. You need to simulate what they're going to be doing in their actual job. So if they're going to be building a web application, and communicating with the database and getting data and then rendering it onto a web page, then ask them to do that. Don't ask them to solve some esoteric thing that they might have, learned in computer science school
15 years ago.
Don't ask them. No one's going to remember that. It's really high pressure. It's not realistic. And there's a lot of people still doing that. But so don't ask them to do the wrong thing. And then when they're doing it, be a human, like, be realistic. If they're getting stuck on something stupid, or you can tell they're actually a good coder, even if they didn't do X, Y, or Z, they might still pass. So there's those two sides of it.
My sourcers and recruiters, we hate the automated coding tests, because more often than not, we're seeing it, and actually we see ageism can pop in. The further you are away from your CS degree and the theory, you are, you're Googling for crap. You're pulling from coding databases, GitHub, whatever. But you've got all these places where you can solve problems without using your theory, and you're 15 years removed. So the younger coders tend to do better at some of those, esoteric, as you put it, like esoteric, coding tests, because they just did that. Whereas the people that have been coding for 15 plus years, they're so far removed that it ends up washing them out.
Yeah.
I hate that. So that's why we hate the automated coding tests.
Yeah, there's definitely some pitfalls there.
Yeah, I think right there I might have lost like my one viewer. It's probably some person going like, we want to automate all these things that this guy says. Oh crap, he's insulting me now. The other part is, I think, there are a lot of those little chat bots now, that are trying to automate,
right.
and they're pretending to be a person.
Right.
This is my ask. If anybody from this industry is listening, please just be clear what you're trying to do with the chat bot, that you're using them to collect the information and automate the collection of information. Don't insult them by pretending to be a person.
Yeah.
Please just
totally.
The Turing test, it's not there. We're not there yet, unless you work inside Google, and the AIs are becoming sentient. But in this case, no, it's obvious that I can answer anything, and you'll pull. It's not a person.
Totally.
Well, one of the other things that in today's economy, again, with everybody being geographically dispersed, and people being so hard to building those meaningful connections, one of the how do you might place somebody, do you keep in touch with them, or are you kind of relying on the client to kind of keep that relationship going? How does that work with you? Because you're trying to get the reason, and what I'm getting at is, we have members of our team that are they're employees of us. We employ them. They're full-time employees here, but they are consultants. They go out and they work remotely from Nashville or from wherever they are. So they're building relationships with the client. They're building relationships with us, because we're making a point of doing that. How do you manage that dichotomy?
So you're talking about like you're placing like people doing recruiting inside of other companies?
Well, we do it as an extension of their team.
Yeah.
So we're more of a professional services. We're more like a lawyer. That we do more like legal, like a lawyer or an accountant would be done. Relationship would be. But so we have people that we've recognized that if we don't keep the relationship with IQTP, at the same time that they're building a relationship with their client, we see people moving on to their client to go work with their clients. And we want them to stay with us to then work with other clients as well. How are you building that connection with the people that you're placing?
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, what you're doing is similar to what we do in that, but you're just like, we've considered actually that model where you place someone doing recruiting on an hourly basis, right? With
just use us. We'll partner with you. We'll partner with you.
Yeah. Right. So like, but we actually just do it a little bit later in the process. Like when our typical model is, we're actually at the end of the day a services company. Like the agreements are to provide software development services, and so they get, just like your people, they're fully integrated with the client, but they're actually working on their applications there, right? And so there does become a point sometimes where clients want to have that relationship directly. I mean, it's not our business model. It's not something we're hoping to have happen. And so how do we how do we maintain that relationship? I think a lot of it is by having a great experience up front and building that connection up front. So it's like, you know, yeah, if we were totally automated, there would be less loyalty, I think. But they're speaking with, a small intimate team, and we will um you know make a connection with them while we're placing them. And honestly, there's an incentive to maintain that relationship, because it's not, I think it's more frequent that the client's project comes to an end, and
Yes.
then they're saying, hey, I got to find my next thing, and hey, we would love to place you again on another one. We know you're a known quantity now. You've done well. We've had good feedback on you. Let's get, that's the best kind of thing. We don't have to go through both of these interviews, the initial interview and the live coding exercise. You already did that, and you've got great positive client feedback. Like, let's get you on another one. Now I can tell this client, I've worked with this guy they've logged 2,000 hours on this client project and that project. I can very, very confident, more confident than other candidates, that this one's going to succeed. Boom. And so we can add a lot of continuity. Sometimes, even if there's not continuity, another client we can put them on, we'll bring them on to an internal project, and have them do something for us. So I don't know if that is what you were getting
no,
at.
that's what I wanted to see, how within your model, how are you building those relationships? And a lot of it is from professional development. So we're always, doing what we call nerducations. These are lunch and learns that we do all the time. We have an infrastructure, at IQTP, where we're surrounding our team members with career growth and an opportunity and variety, because if one engagement ends, we just move them to another one. If somebody wants more exposure to full life cycle recruiting, we will move them into that direction. So we have, that's how we're focused on the development side, and then we coach our team members on how to integrate at the client level, but without losing sight that they are part of IQ Talent. They are they're our team, and we want to make sure that they're fulfilled, but then also they have work-life balance. That's the other part.
Totally.
We want to make sure that they're not working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. We're making sure that it's a manageable time, that they have the flexibility to be there for their family and be there for themselves. And I think that's why we typically, that's why we've been focusing so much more on developing our talent and to retain them, because we have their best interests in mind, and we don't want them to just be doing the same stuff over and over again.
Definitely. Yeah, we do have an education program where anyone who you earn credits for every hour that you work on a client project, and then those can be applied to a very unstrict list of personal development. It's pretty lax. If you think it might apply, it probably does. And so you earn credits, and we'll fund whether you want to. For us, it's things like, oh, I want to learn this new technology.
Yeah.
Or I might be from Brazil and I want to take a class to improve my English, or anything in that realm.
See, that builds relationships, that builds connections, and that also fosters a little bit more of a sense of ownership, in their career with you and their time with you. Well, Damien, we're coming up on the end here. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of give everyone an idea, information on how to connect with you, and then I'll close this out.
Yeah, well, if you are interested in learning more about Scalable Path, just check us out at scalablepath.com. And that's whether you're a client looking to hire, or whether you're a developer or designer or project manager looking for remote work.
Awesome. You can also stalk them on LinkedIn. We'll put your link to your LinkedIn bio
Great.
in the notes below. I think it's below, maybe it's above, depending on the platform. But thanks again for taking the time to connect today. And
Thank you.
I look forward to staying connected.
Me too.
Thanks, Damien.
Bye, Chris.